welcome to Headspace, the show where we discuss the week's top stories with Mint's editor Sukumar Ranganathan. Sukumar, welcome to the show. Let's quickly start by talking about the set of numbers that have come out this week. Inflation numbers, export numbers, right? Monetary policy review is due next week. What sort of expectations do you have from it? For once, the government as well as the RBI seem to be on the same page. Do you agree?
To some extent, yes. Right. Everyone seems to be of the opinion that the Reserve Bank will go ahead and cut rates marginally, right? And when I say marginally, I mean marginally. It's not going to be a huge rate cut. But if you look at what the governor has been saying, he delivered a speech at the London School of Economics last week, where we didn't entirely dismiss the government's efforts, but he spoke about the challenges that lie ahead for the economy. And he said that at this point in time, we need to work towards making structural changes. And this is something that many experts have been saying for quite some time. Because what we really need to do is to somehow enhance the capacity of the Indian economy to grow without this growth resulting in inflation. And the only way in which you can do that is if you address what are popularly called supply side issues or capacity issues. And by stressing on this, I think it's a sort of the joker in the pack, because everyone seemed to think that a rate cut was a certainty. Now, I'm not so sure. It could still happen. Yeah, but to my mind, the governor still sounds a wee bit hawkish, right? And so we'll have to wait and watch. The good thing about the Reserve Bank is that they seem to they're not swayed by popular sentiment, because I don't think central banks should be swayed by either popular or political sentiment or desires or anything of that sort. So we'll have to see. But again, to be fair and to come back to the issue that you raised, since September, the government has done several things. It's made its intent very clear, especially in terms of subsidies with what they've done with diesel, for instance. And that, to my mind, is a little difficult to ignore. So you have to admit the fact that you have to accept the fact that they're trying very hard to walk the talk. Right.
But then you said that structural changes, maybe they're touching upon what the budget did not do. It's a common thing that commonly accepted fact that budgets try to not make too many changes at the same time, trying to keep the fiscal balance in place.
Yeah, but this budget, I think, I know a lot of people have criticized this budget, but to my mind, it was a pretty good budget.
Right.
Sure, he's sort of betting on growth to sort of make up the numbers. He's also betting on the fact that subsidy payouts will not be so high, that the government can raise more money through disinvestment and other things, and the auctions and all that. So leaving aside all those assumptions, it's not a profligate budget, right? So the budget hasn't sent out any wrong signals. I think the structural issues, you don't need a budget to address the structural issues, right? That's something that can be done over a period of time. And I don't think this budget, especially given that 2014 is an election year, I don't think this budget would have been the right forum or vehicle to do that.
Right. But when we talk about structural changes, what is it that the government can do? Maybe will it be driven by doing things which will attract more investment, which will be linked to growth? What are the options with the government?
See, you'll have to make it easier to do business in the country. You'll have to attract investments. You will have to make infrastructure easily available and infrastructure that delivers easily available. You'll have to remove bottlenecks in various things, from land to various supply chains that have to do with agriculture. So there are a whole gamut of things that they can really do, and then there are also things that they can do in terms of the financial structure, in terms of reducing the government's own expenditure. If they want to be radical, they can actually do away with a few government departments, although that's far too radical. So the limits of what they can do practically endless. But then we are speaking theoretically. You'll have to look at it practically and pragmatically. This is a coalition government.
Right.
This is the penultimate year before a budget, and this is probably the last budget because the next one may well be a vote on account. So you'll have to, given all that, I think you'll have to look at what can be done and what can't be done.
Sure. Talking about investments, Sukumar, as far as FDI in aviation is concerned, when the government opened up FDI in aviation, we've seen these two big deals, Air Asia as well as Etihad and Jet. But when it comes to FDI in retail, we've not, seeing any sort of proposals there as far as
Etihad and Jet, I think still remains to be inked.
Right.
So the intent is clear, but there are various commitments that they want from the government and other things, and so it will take some time. But you're right, retail we haven't seen that, and I think the reason for that twofold really. One, the kind of controversy that it generated, and two, I think companies are becoming smarter. They're looking at the fact that even the Indian companies, the large Indian conglomerates that got into retail, found the going tough for quite some time, and so maybe they are waiting to get their plans perfectly right, their India strategy in place, maybe, and then look at making an entry. So that could be one reason why you're saying this.
Entire Walmart issue of bribery.
And of course, like I said, it's been extremely controversial. The Walmart issue, for instance, about various things, including the fact of whether Walmart really sort of jumped the gun and did things before it was completely all right to go ahead and do those things. So it's understandable that they tread carefully, that they come in slowly. See, retail anyway is not. It's not as if you invest today and your returns come in tomorrow, especially in a country like India. I think it's a 10-year, 15-year game before you can really start counting your profits. So I think a year lost this way or that way doesn't really make too much of a difference.
Right. Talking about retail, there was a recent report that Reliance is thinking of investing some $27 billion over the next 4 years. It has a good
across
presence.
its businesses.
Yes, across its businesses. It's a very good presence in retail as well. So what do you make of its sort of future plans?
Yeah, this is an interesting number simply because we'd never heard this number before, right? And it came out in a research report. Research report was based on a conversation that this firm had with one of Reliance's CFOs. And this is a company which is cash rich, right? It's got lots of money, and it's been raising more money through various ways. So it's got lots of money, and obviously shows that they have ambitious plans for sectors in which they already are, as well as for some of the new sectors. I think out of the 27 billion, 3 billion or 4 billion, 3 billion I think was the earmark for the telecom venture, also the broadband wireless venture.
The latest.
Yeah, so which is the 4G plan that they have. And again, that bodes well because it shows that they're going to come in scale like everyone expected them to, but now the number sort of backs that up. Retail again is a substantial investment. The shale gas venture that they have, shale gas in the US, again sees a substantial investment. So I think it bodes well for in terms of what they plan to do across sectors, looking at both existing businesses as well as new businesses and continuing to pump money into those businesses, and which only makes sense, because if you look at it, none of these businesses are really what you would call cash cows. They're not the kind of businesses where you completely stop investments and you milk the business for what it's worth. Most of these businesses are still growth businesses. Some of these businesses are emergent businesses. You look at shale gas, you look at 4G, even retail. So people may think organized retail has been in India for quite some time, but you look at the size, you look at who's doing well, who's not doing well, and then you look at the size of the opportunity. You really have to call it an emergent business. So I think it's significant. It shows that it's a conglomerate that's still very, very hungry for growth and
the intent to invest
and true to form. What more than anything else, this number 27 billion clearly shows that in terms of size, scale, and scope, this is a company whose vision hasn't changed, right? They've always been, it's always been a group that's emphasized on these elements, you know, size and scale and scope, and doing things at a very, very large scale.
And
that's
talking big, probably.
Exactly, and that's what they're doing. Not just talking big, I think it's also doing big, right? Because if you look at the quantum of investments they made, whether it's in refining or in telecom, or in petrochemicals, they're not very significant investments. You know, they're not small investments. So I think it's just in keeping in line with that trend.
There was another very disturbing report that came out this week, which was that a UN agency has said that India is the 13th worst in terms of air safety. Now, what is your take on this? Just laxity on the part of the government, or some serious structural changes required there?
See, I don't know whether there are structural changes required or not, but this is clearly it's worrying, you know, because all of us fly, and it worries people at a very personal level. The incidence of accidents still remains few, right? And that's true all over the world, which is good. But that's also a function of overall how safe most aircraft have become over a period of time. But I think you need to have the right kind of approach to it. And India's aviation market over the last 10-12 years has really grown manifold. It's really, there was a boom, and then companies haven't been doing too well for the last few years. And then you're seeing the possible entrance of another large company now. And our skies are getting crowded. Right, the number of flights are increasing. Our airports are getting crowded, which means on ground safety practices and in-air safety practices have to improve. And then of course there's also the ATC factor, right? You need to make sure, because air traffic control is a high stress job, you need to make sure you have well qualified people who are adequately compensated. And who know how to deal with this increase in traffic in charge. And again, you know, lots of little issues at various levels, and I think the UN report highlights those. It's not as if every time you fly there's an accident. So you know, some people may like to panic, and when they see an air safety report coming out which says India is the 13th worst, they might tend to think the worst, but I don't think that's the case. But it's still worrying, and that's and to me the report is a wake up call, you know, and I hope people take it seriously instead of just dismissing it.
Sure, and we've been having some really bad, disastrous instances.
Yeah, the Mangalore one was a disaster, but you know, it's been attributed now to pilot error. You know, the person in charge, who was an expatriate, who didn't really pull out when he could have pulled out, and went ahead with that landing in Mangalore, which resulted in the deaths of so many people. But like I said, those instances are few and far between. So I don't think you can equate air safety with crashes, but it's still very worrying, because you know there's a certain process that needs to be followed. There are certain processes that need to be followed. And I think those are the gaps that this report is highlighting. So it's a good opportunity for India to sort of look at it, get its act together. You want to make sure that accidents which are few and far between remain few and far between. You know, so you have to make sure of that.
Right. Hopefully, some new ventures will bring some global best practices.
I'm not so sure, you know, because
it's more of a government.
It's more of a government thing, and even if you look at ground traffic, which is you know, the number of buses you see in airports, that's gone up, and you have to have very, very disciplined practices, that very, very clear practices, and then people have to be disciplined in how they follow them. That's not happening.
Hopefully this report will be a wake-up call.
That's right.
And with that, thank you so much for taking time out. That's all we have for you in today's edition of EdSpace. Stay tuned for more.